So when leaders are driving change, a lot of the focus is on the roadmap of the structures and processes that we're trying to put in place. But when you think about change, what actually makes change stick in the long term is if we're able to change our culture. This is because the culture of our organization is really what drives the behaviors that we see inside our organization. And actually, the best way to think about this is to take inspiration from the quote from Alexander Den Hayer, who says, when a flower fails to bloom, you don't blame the flower, right? You don't focus on the flower. You focus on the environment in which the flower is actually sitting. And so that's really important when we think about culture. And that thinking is what inspired the culture map from Strategyzer. So on the culture map, you can see that in the middle, we have behavior. These are the behaviors that we want people to kind of engage in. This is what's visible. This is what we get to see. But you also have outcomes, which are the visible results we're trying to produce. These are the things that are usually the result of the behavior. But actually underneath both behavior and outcomes is what we call enablers and blockers. And these are the factors inside our organization that are enabling and blocking people from engaging in particular behaviors. And so the focus of all the change initiatives that we do shouldn't be too much on the behavior and the outcomes. Sure, you can train people and teach them how to behave differently to create these outcomes, but the thing that really matters is making sure that we're removing blockers and creating more enablers so that these behaviors are sitting in the right environment for them to flourish. So let's think a little bit about the blockers of innovation. In certain organizations, the rewards that we give people can be based on revenue targets, which then means that in terms of behavior, all the decisions that they're making are based on financial forecasts. And so then it's not surprising that the outcome you get is that all the innovation is incremental. Another blocker to think about is when failure becomes career suicide. Like if your project fails, you're far more likely to really damage your career prospects inside an organization. So when people know that, they start hiding their innovation projects because they don't want leaders to know about it. And over time, all that stress can produce this outcome that your innovation talent starts to leave the organization. So this is the value of making sure that you have the right enablers and you remove all these blockers from your organization. So now let's think about putting in place enablers of innovation. So you can imagine if, let's say, innovation is not just in the bottom of the organization, right? But innovation has legitimacy and power within the organization. Maybe you have the chief innovation officer also sitting in the C-suite and being part of the leadership team within the organization. In that case, you might see the behaviors that innovation then shows up on the agenda of all the important meetings within the company. And with that level of focus, that organization is far more likely to be able to start creating new growth engines as an outcome. Another enabler for innovation is when you create an innovation fast track by working with colleagues from key functions. So think about, let's say, legal and compliance and all the rules they have. If you're able to create a fast track for innovation in legal and compliance, the behavior you'll then start to see is that people who are working on innovation and people who are working in these key functions are far more likely to collaborate. So innovation won't struggle so much to thrive, which then allows you to produce this outcome where you can get maybe a higher return on your investments in R&D. So you can see the value of thinking about transformation through this lens of culture, right? If you focus on the enablers, you're far more likely to create the environment that supports the behaviors that you want to see from people, and those behaviors are then far more likely to produce the outcomes that create value for your organization.